faceoff. Shoots it, deflected. Right in. Pietrangelo save rebound. Stastny stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Neither does Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie sparkling on that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He should get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to episode 64 of Tendy Talk, presented by the BLPA and the Hockey Podcast Networks. I am your host Joe, better known as Wash Up Goalie on social media. This week I chat with another fellow Hockey Podcast Network host, Shane Ryan of the Sens Hour Podcast and the 13th Man Sports Podcast. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Shane. Well, Shane, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Nice to talk to you, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I know we tried planning something before the new year, but that kind of got squashed. The joys of being a father, right? You kind of at mercy of your child.
Luckily, I've got two of my own. They're a little bit older now, so I get it. Even with a soon to be 15 and a 13-and-a-half-year-old, same struggles.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better until they're like 18, and then they can go out on themselves, and you don't have to worry about them too much.
As I get older, my kids get older, I almost think that's almost worse, because then it's like, okay, what are they doing? Versus when they're at home just not going to bed, that's easy.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a ways away to worry about that, though.
Yeah. No, just this weekend, my wife took my daughter out for the first time to do some practice driving as she's starting driver's ed here at the end of the month. And it was like, oh my God, we've hit that stage already.
Yeah, it's those milestones creep up on you.
Yeah. Although I just keep asking, can't we invest in a car service for her? Do we have to let her drive?
That's fair.
So how old's your little one?
She is 14 months.
Oh, that's a really fun time then.
Oh yeah, she's on the go constantly, always running around, getting her hands into everything that she can.
Yep.
So.
It's funny because she's at that age where you're probably starting to, if you haven't already started potty training, and a lot of dads I talk to, they're like, oh man, I can't wait till they're potty trained. And I look at them, I go, no, you can't wait till you've bought your last box of diapers. Because just because they're potty trained doesn't mean you're done with that.
Yeah, that's we're getting there, and hopefully, but I mean, yeah, that's probably not another, like, it's sometime this year, but
yeah,
I'm not worried too much about it.
Yeah, with our daughter, we kind of rushed her into it when we found out we were having almost Irish twins. They're 15 months apart, so it was like, we can't be buying diapers for two for that long, so we kind of pushed her along.
Yeah, I mean, hey, any reason to get it done quicker, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk some hockey. You're Canadian, so it's obvious how you got into the sport, but how did you get started in it? Was it mom and dad played, you had older siblings? How did you get started skating?
So it's funny, like, I never really had that family connection in terms of how I got started playing, like, because my mom, like, the age gap between her and her siblings are so wide. Like, my cousins are so much older than me. Like, I'm the youngest in the family, and the cousins range.
Yeah. So
it's like one of my older cousins, big goalie. So, like, I had that, but honestly, I just love the position. I grew up watching, Bordeaux, Luongo, Belfort, Joseph Hasek. Like, I watched those guys. Those are my favorite players to watch. Liam was fantastic in Ottawa, and I just gravitated towards the position. I just always wanted to be a goalie. I loved it. I love playing it. I still do. If I don't play it as much as I used to, I still love the position. But yeah, I just got into it, and I don't know how it works in the States, but in Canada, they try to allow everyone to play every position when you're at a young age.
Yep.
Like, I started playing hockey when I was like 8. So my first 2 years, they're like, oh yeah, everyone can play a position, but no one on my team really wanted to be a goalie my first year outside of me. So they're like, you know what? We're going to make you the goalie. So basically not even like halfway through the year, I was the designated goaltender for my team. And that doesn't usually happen very often.
Yep.
So I was lucky in that sense. But yeah, it's always been a position where I'm like, I love this position. It's probably one of the funnest to play. And I mean, I agree with the saying that it takes some kind of crazy to play it.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because USA Hockey they push for everybody to play, especially at the mite level. Everybody's got to take turns, but you hear so often there's usually that one kid on the team where it's like, I'm the goalie. I'm gonna be a goalie. I just want to play goalie now. Like, stop making me skate out. I started playing as a squirt, so that I forget what age level that is. It's just after mites, pretty much, but. And it was like, no, I want to be a goalie. The team I played on that first year, we had 2 goalies. So the coach said, if you're not playing this game, you're skating out. And we just rotated. It was like, okay, that works. I still get to play goalie. But then when it's not my game, I don't have to sit on the bench. That worked for me. And that was really the last time I skated out, with the exception of one spring. I had a buddy moving away. I signed up for spring hockey late. So I was like, yeah, if we can be on a line together, I'll play. And so we did. And those are the only 2 times I've been a forward.
Yeah, see, I didn't mind playing forward. I was a winger. Heatley was my favorite forward, so I was lucky enough my first 2 years to grab number 15. Absolutely loved it. But I was always a big kid, so like I was, which made me in goal so much easier, because I was like, most of these kids at my age aren't going to be able to like move the puck up. They're not going to be able to do a lot of things that like the older kids would do.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I just always loved being a goalie. And I mean, I play offensive line in football, and it kind of takes the same mentality to play both positions, because you're getting, you're in the brunt of everything. It takes that kind of mentality to be in those things. It's just like, it just kind of was natural to me to be put in net.
Yeah. So complete side tangent, because we're goalies. So you play football growing up in Canada. Now, youth high school football in Canada, do you guys play Canadian football rules, or do you play American football? What do you guys play growing up?
So we played Canadian. I mean, I didn't play high school because it's actually in Ottawa, at least. Like, we have football in the last probably like 5 years has taken a complete like left turn for the better in terms of amateur football. There's been so much more growth in it than it was when I was playing. But I played city ball. I played a little bit of provincial, but it's just all for 3 downs. There are some leagues though that did play 4 downs but with Canadian rules, just because they wanted to kind of show that, okay, these guys can play. There is a seniors league that plays 4 down rules. It's just because I guess it's easier, and there's no age restriction, so you can play 18 all the way until you want to play. So I guess their thought process is 4 downs. It's a little bit easier, but yeah, I play Canadian football. I mean, I don't mind American, but I mean, I'm not the biggest NFL fan. I much prefer NCAA or the CFL over the NFL in terms of like pace of the game.
Yeah.
But I've played both, and they're both still fun to play.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's still football, and I like here in the States we're starting to be able to watch the CFL a lot more. And it's fun because I don't quite know all of the rules, but I know enough of them to understand the game. Because you guys got some goofy ones here and there. It's like, what do they do? Excuse me, what do they do? And then it's like, oh, okay. So it's kind of nice that we're able to see more of the Canadian game now. And I remember as a kid, every now and then on like ESPN or something, you'd catch a CFL game, but not enough to really know what was going on with that craziness. So I'm happy that there's more access to it here now.
Yeah, I know. I think it's what ESPN and ESPN, their streaming service. I've basically, between the two of them, got basically all the games now, but it's usually I think on ESPN Plus or something like that for most of the season. I mean, it's great seeing a lot of Americans who I've talked to. They're like, yeah, I started watching it. It's on ESPN. It's just kind of a fun filler, and like trust me, you're not the only person who's been confused by some of our rules. I know the Rouge is a big one.
Yeah.
The 3 downs kind of confuse people, like why the less down?
Yeah, the first time you watch it, you're like, why are they punting on 3rd down? This makes no sense.
But honestly, there's a couple of rules I think the NFL could adopt that would make the game better.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to goaltending. I mean, you mentioned the goalies I idolized growing up. You know, Belfour, Hasek, Waugh. I didn't have the appreciation for Brodeur until I was older and he was older, because I've mentioned it before in talking to people on the podcast. At that time, you had guys like Waugh. You had Hasek at the top of his game. So it was, you know, you look at it and Brodeur was good, but he didn't seem like the best one at that particular juncture in time until you look back and see his body of work. In fact, Neil from the Devils podcast, you know, we were talking about it, and if you think about it, Hasek is the best goalie ever if you look at a one set period in time. You know, there's like that 3-year span where nobody can argue he was the greatest in the game. But if you look at Brodeur and his longevity, his career spanned, 4 decades? Because he played in the
mid-90s, like 95 through until I think like 2000,
so 3 decades at least. Yeah, it's like his longevity, and he played in at least 3 different distinct eras, and he was among the best in all 3 of them. And he still had the small equipment for all 3, so it made his accomplishments later on in his career, to me, all the more impressive. And I think one of the things that really hurt him in the eyes of some at the time was the New Jersey Devils trap. They're like, well, anybody can play back there. And it's like, yeah, but if you looked at the shots he was getting, even though there weren't that many, they were high danger shots. You know, you look at like Brian DeCord's new app for goalies and the way they track and average out, you know, anticipated goals against, you know, Brodeur was probably stopping more than he should have at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, I never got to watch prime Patrick Waugh.
Yeah.
So like I'm a 97 baby. So Patrick Waugh was kind of near the decline of his career. It's the same thing with Hasek. Like both those two guys, even Belfour in that case, were kind of in the decline of their year. Like they were in their back half of their career. Kind of when Brodeur was kind of hitting the middle of his career. So Brodeur for me is my favorite goaltender of all time.
Yeah.
Because I watched him from basically his prime through till the end of his career. And you watch the things that he did. And maybe it's also because I watched him basically win that 2003 series against Ottawa single-handedly.
Yeah.
It kind of was like, wow, like this guy, like it just shows you how a very, like an elite Hall of Fame level goaltender could do for a team.
Yeah.
And I just kind of fell in love with him, the way he played the game, that carefree mind, like that carefree attitude of like, I'm just going to do whatever I can to make a save, but I'm also not going to, you know, hot dog or showboat or like try to do something I don't have to do. And I think that's kind of
a lot of that in Marc-Andre Fleury, I think, too. Another guy who, in what I would consider his prime, I didn't appreciate him. I thought he was overrated. And now that he's had that longer career and still at the top of the league, same thing, you know, not showboating, just going out there, having fun, making the saves when he has to. I see a lot of parallels between those two.
Yeah, and I mean, every goaltender showboats at one point or like one point in time. Like it just happens. But you can tell when watching Patrick Waugh and Dominic Hasek is that there were times where they were intentionally making a big save to rub it in the shooter's face.
Yeah.
You don't really see that with Brodeur in any of his highlights. It doesn't really feel like he over exaggerated a save. It's the same thing with Fleury. It's the reason why I really like Price. It's the same thing. He doesn't really over exaggerate a save to make it like showboaty in the player's face. And it's interesting watching these different like elite level goaltenders especially in this era, because you know, you have guys like Jordan Binnington who, you know, however you want to feel about him, he's probably, you know, a top 10, top 15 in the league.
Yep.
But you're seeing a lot of those kind of goaltenders who are really good. They kind of don't last long. They don't have
Right.
long careers.
The Jim Carreys.
Yeah, they just if you're gonna put a negative impact on the team, eventually that skill is gonna start to decline, and if you can't adjust,
Yeah,
you're done for.
yeah. Well, and to your point too, a perfect example of the goaltender who's great but didn't have the longevity. Jonathan Quick. I thought he was going to have a much longer, run of dominance. He had 4 or 5 years, but then injuries and whatnot caught up to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the injuries are the bigger part.
Mm-hmm.
He relied so much on his athleticism going side to side.
Yeah.
And I think he injured his hip in like 2016.
Yeah.
And hip injuries are one of the hardest as a goaltender to come back from.
Yeah, he hasn't been the same.
Yeah, and he's shown glimpses of it, especially this year, like the 2021 calendar year. He has shown glimpses of his former self. But it's like why I'm kind of curious about Tuukka Rask. Like, is Tuukka Rask going to be able to come back and be as effective as he was in previous years after this injury? We'll find out. But I agree. Quick was one of those guys that was up and coming, and then an improper injury or ill-timed injury has kind of just derailed it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I look at some goalies who they didn't necessarily dominate, but they were good, and they didn't quite maybe get the chances. I'm thinking of a guy like Enroth who, still playing in Sweden. And it's like, he could probably still be playing in the NHL if given the chance, but people look at him, well, you're not the next up and coming, so we're going to move on from you. It's kind of like some of these guys, I wonder how they would do. But then you look at a guy like Quick and now Rask. It's like, what if they would have been in a good platoon system of a 1A and a 1B? Would that have made a difference to their career? Not as many games, but would they have dominated longer?
Possibly, and that's the big what if.
Yeah.
There's two goaltenders that when you talk about goaltenders who were good and if in any better situation would have been considered probably top tier goaltenders in the NHL, Jimmy Howard in Detroit and Cam Ward in Carolina. Mm-hmm. Like if you actually watch their body of work when they were in their prime, these two goaltenders were ridiculous. If you put them in any other situation, especially the last half of Jimmy's career where you could start seeing the cracks in Detroit, how much better he would have been perceived in a different team.
I think those are two great examples because a Hawks fan, I had my eye on Detroit for a long time until they moved him out into the Eastern Division or conference, I mean. And he was coming up. I'm going, how does it was almost like Green Bay in football. It's like you get one Hall of Fame quarterback retiring, so you just bring up another one. And as a Bears fan, I'm like, how is that even possible? We can't find one in my lifetime. In Detroit, it was kind of the same way. Osgood, I don't care what you say, belongs in the Hall of Fame. And then
I agree.
And now you have Jimmy Howard coming behind him. I'm like, man, that's just not fair. But he didn't have the team in front of him. Cam Ward, I mean, luckily he got that Stanley Cup his rookie year, but then things went downhill in Carolina, and that's a hockey market that if they could just keep things going for, a couple of years stretch, that's a market that is kind of a quiet hockey hotbed.
Yeah. And I mean, people are like, oh, it's not going to work. Well, it's like, I know a lot of people make fun of Carolina as one of those teams. And it's like, yeah, it's not going to work because you had 9 years of losing. Who's going to go out and support a team that's consistently losing? Why would you do that? Why would you waste money?
Yeah.
Supporting a team that's just going to consistently lose and be at the bottom of the league year in and year out. You have to the diehards are going to still support it. But if you're expecting casual fans, which most of the NHL market is, I think the idea that the NHL market is just all diehards or majority diehards, that's not the case. The majority of hockey fans are, casual fans who will support a team that's competitive because they want to support a competitive team. They don't want to support a loser.
Well, and
You're
here's
not
the
trying.
thing too. For just me and my wife, not me and the whole family to go to a game, it's a $400-500 evening for us. By the time we buy tickets, pay for parking, you know, get a drink or two at the game, and of course we got to get nachos because that's how I am. It's like by the time that's done, that's a $500 night for us. If we bring the kids, we're looking at $1,000. So yeah, you're not going to get the diehard fans because the diehard fan can pay for their ticket and pay for parking, and they'll have a beer before they get into the arena. So it's a relatively cheap night. But the casual fan, that's not what they're looking for. So it might be only 1 or 2 games a year they go to, and then if it's on TV, they're going to watch it. But that's, I think, what's hurting Carolina is the price of the game. But thank God for Rod Brindamore kind of revitalizing that franchise.
Oh yeah, I mean he's probably been the best thing for that franchise being named coach. But again, like I think there's 4 markets that kind of are the reason why everyone's like, oh, if you're an attendance issue, you're just in a bad market.
Yeah.
That's the Rangers, the Leafs, Boston, and arguably now, I mean, it probably could have been Chicago, but it's different in Chicago now. But even Detroit, like,
yep.
You look at how the Detroit Red Wings fans have kind of embraced the last couple of years and have still shown support.
Yep.
Toronto fans will show support no matter who's on the ice or how bad they're playing. Edmonton could be lumped in there too. Like there's been so many, there's like 5 to 7 fan bases that have created this idea of like, you're going to support this team no matter what, or you're not a real fan or you're not a real hockey market. And it's like, that's not how it works, especially in the States when you have so many other teams available to watch.
Yeah. And you're right. The Hawks, growing up with them. And when I was growing up, home games weren't on TV because Bill Wirtz, Dollar Bill, as us fans called them, thought if the games were on TV, people wouldn't come to the games. And it was like, no, people didn't come to the games because the old Chicago Stadium was in the worst part of the city. That was the problem. But they were still selling out, having good games. I mean, you only went into that part of town on game night. And it wasn't until kind of that late 90s, early 2000s that Hawks fans got fed up and they said, you know what, we're still going to support this team. We're going to watch every game that we can on TV, but we're not going to give you our money anymore. We're tired of giving you money for just to put a terrible team out there. And that's what happened literally until the day he died and his kids took over the team. And within like a month, home games were on TV. Luckily they had Kane and Taves already in the system, and things were turning around. But it was really fans. They kind of got fed up with supporting them for so long that they said the only way to, make ownership feel it is to not show up to the games. And I'm guessing if I went back and looked at, merchandise sales, they were still top half of the league. It was just, we're not going to show up to games and act like we support the garbage you're throwing out here. I mean, they hired a coach named Elpo Suhonen, whose previous job was like conductor of a symphony orchestra in Sweden. That was one of their coaches. And it was like, how does this even happen? Thank God Elpo didn't last too long. And even with, like the day he was hired, there was already jokes about, the coach being dog food because of the Elpo dog food that was out there. It's just like, that was the gong show that was happening. That was kind of a last straw for fans. And they went, we're not going to give you our money anymore. We love the team, but we're not going to give you our money.
And it's unfortunate because there's such a thin line between wanting to support the players on the team because they shouldn't be impacted by negative ownership.
Yep.
And realize and being like, well, we can support you guys, but this owner needs to put money into the team. And I think as a Sens fan, that's kind of where we're at with Melnyk, is that like we want to go support guys like Kachuk and Norris and Batherson and co. And he's put money into it like he said he would. He spent the big bucks. He's got Kachuk signed. He got Batherson signed. So like he is living up to his word. But it's like the on-ice product, like we haven't really moved the needle yet. And yeah, we have prospects in the system, and Pierre Dorion's job is extremely difficult. You have to, wage the battles of waiting for these prospects to develop, or potentially bringing in like a log jam in certain positions. It's not an easy job.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand why fans are like, we don't want to go to games. We don't want to spend money on a team that's going to finish bottom 5 consistently. So it's in that weird limbo state in Ottawa right now.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I mean, that was a team where, they were good for quite a long time, and, fans probably got used to it. And then you had the rebuild start, and it's taken too long.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think is that it took too long. I just think it's like Ottawa had to make a choice on, you have these guys like Carlson, Stone, you bring in Duchesne, and you have to make a choice, like mediocrity, because Ottawa has consistently missed the playoffs and then made the playoffs and whatnot, or you rebuild completely, start from scratch, and it's going to be a 4 or 5 year process because you have to rebuild the prospect pool. And we weren't Detroit when they decided to start the rebuild, that they had Tyler Bertuzzi and Dylan Larkin in their system,
right?
And they just had to add pieces. Like Ottawa legitimately had Shabbat, which was fantastic. That's great. But they had to add, Kachuk. Batherson was a 4th round pick, so no one really expected him to turn out the way he has. So my argument to Sens fans is about, when the rebuild started. The rebuild started ahead of the 18-19 season. So we're realistically in year 4.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also argue that because of the fact that
is it really year 3?
Season, it's really only year 3. I made the, because Sens fans were like, "Oh, fire DJ Smith, fire DJ Smith." I'm like, why are you going to fire a coach? And this was literally early during the 2021 season. Why? And I mean, I got on the board a little bit because I felt like he wasn't learning from his mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at the same time, why are you going to fire a coach who has less than a full season's worth of games? He didn't hit his full season worth of games until game 11 or 12 of last season.
And he's done fairly well with what he has. It's not like Colleton in Chicago, who has on paper a playoff team, but was not producing, and players were towing the company line saying, yeah, we believe in his systems and everything else. But when you read between the lines, they're saying it's too complicated. So they get rid of them, and then they go on a tear right away. And, they've leveled off a little bit. They've had some injury issues. But Derek King showed, that this is a better team than what he was coaching. But I don't sense that with the Senators, that they're underperforming for the most part. I mean, every team has that span where they just suck. But, they've been, in my opinion, performing to expectations.
I mean, they've definitely been playing below play compared to last year. But, you lost Colin White before the season.
Mm-hmm.
And you're already relatively thin center-wise. You lose Shane Pinto 3 games into the season. We lost Clark Bishop right at training camp, and he's entering the team as our 5th center. But for a team that's already weak at center, losing 3 of your top 5 centers is going to hurt.
Right.
And we don't, Formanton wasn't really playing up to expectations at the beginning of the year. Same with, Stützle was looking good, but he was paired with Nick Paul and Connor Brown. And as much as I like Nick Paul, he's a bottom 6 center or bottom 6 player. Very good one.
Yep. Every good team needs a really good bottom 6 player.
Yeah. He's a great bottom 6 guy. He would be a great bottom 6 guy for any playoff team. But when you have a player of Tim Stützle's caliber, playing him with a bottom 6 player and a borderline bottom, middle 9 guy, you're not going to produce a lot. So, he's been able to get, put in a team that has been able to stay competitive for the most part. But there's definitely been a lot of patchwork. And I think because of that, fans are They still don't understand that, okay, he's doing the best that he can with what we have.
Yeah.
And the market just isn't in Ottawa's favor to go out and make a trade for, a top 6 center or a top 6 winger without giving up something of value.
Right. And, it's one of those where you can say it's almost a story tale as old as time, where, it's an issue that isn't unique to Ottawa either. Every team goes through it. I mean, you look at Colorado and the troubles they had for a couple of years, where they had some great top line players, but they didn't have the depth to surround them. Now they're getting more of that, and now they're an underperforming powerhouse.
Yeah, basically.
That one's interesting to me, and that's a whole nother case study. Then you've got Anaheim, who you could say came out of nowhere, but when you step back, you go, no, they just sneakily put together a really good team.
They have the goaltending. Like,
Yeah.
I think people were like, it was funny because I was on the episode with Nick and Neil on the Hockey Hotbed that will be premiering Friday. And I meant, Nick asked what our top storyline of the season so far is, and I mentioned Anaheim because you have Brian Gibson, who has, or is it Brian Gibson? No, it's not.
It's John Gibson.
John Gibson. I don't know why I thought Brian, but yeah, John Gibson. There we go. That's his name.
Too many pucks to the head.
It's because they had a guy named Brian Gibbons, and I got them confused. So John Gibson, who has arguably probably underperformed the last couple of years, but he was still considered, a top-end American goaltender.
Yep.
Ahead of the 1920 season. Like, he was right there with Hellebuck, and arguably those were going to be your top 2 at whenever if you were going to the Olympics, those were going to be your top 2. Then he struggled the last 2 years, and people were like, okay, well, is he really that good? Is he starting to regress already? And he's come out this year, and he's been stellar. And you add in the young scoring that Anaheim is getting with like Troy Terry, Zegras has been amazing, and they've just surprised a lot of people. And a big part of that is because Gibson has looked like Gibson of old, and he has the run support to go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And Gibson, I think it's a classic example of, a guy that just needed a few years to acclimate and really mature, because when you move up from one level to the next, the game's faster, and sometimes you adapt, to go back to football again. You used to see a quarterback sat on the bench for 3-4 years, and then they would get their shot. That's exactly what happened to Aaron Rodgers, and look how it turned out for him. Now you got teams like the Bears, who they draft a quarterback and they're like, let's throw him in the first year, and it doesn't work out. But 3, 4, 5 years down the line, it's like, okay, now they've truly learned the pro game, and they've acclimated, and now they're playing the way everybody thought they would. And I think that's what it is for Gibson. He maybe needed to mature a little bit before they brought him up, and maybe he was rushed into it.
Yeah, and I mean, he's 12-9-6 with a 264 goals against and a 917 save percentage. That's still pretty impressive for a team like Anaheim, who, it's hard because you have so many young players. They're not always going to perform. And,
it helps having a guy like Trevor Zegras on your team, though.
True. Like, he has 4 straight games of all above 900 save percentages. It's like, he struggled the last couple of years, but he is still, like, the last 2 years, he still had like a 903 save percentage. He still had an under, 3 or under goals against. Like, he has still been quietly good while the team around him has sucked. And now you're finally starting to see the team around him better. And people are finally realizing, oh, he's good because the team's winning. And even though, because I think a lot of fans always look at the win-losses and they're like, it's always about the win-losses. It's not always about the win-losses, because there are times where, Carey Price for the longest time carried Montreal. Ryan Miller carried Buffalo. Not always about the win-losses.
Well, look at Montreal. with Price, they go to the finals, and then this year they're a dumpster fire without him.
Yeah.
It's it's funny sometimes when you have a talented goaltender. I mean, that kind of happened to the Hawks a little bit when they decided to move on from Corey Crawford. It was like you had Steady Eddie back there, and now you got a carousel. And Fleury's been a godsend for them. They have some good youth in the minors, and in fact, I think they got a couple good guys that could turn into quality number one goalies, but they need to treat him like they did Crawford. Crawford spent, I think it was 4 years in the AHL before they brought him up. I think Delia could possibly be that next guy for him, or Lankinen. They got those two guys, and then they signed this kid out of, I think it was Sweden, Soderblom. He might be Finnish. I forget off the top of my head, but so they got three really good young goaltenders. It's just they need them all to play, and they don't have that luxury of saying, you guys are on a rotating basis down in Rockford. It's one of you has to be our backup. Now we need somebody on the taxi squad. So it's like they're not even getting games in.
Yeah. See, I always thought it was weird that Rockford was the Chicago's affiliate. I know they've been affiliates for like super long time.
Yep.
But I just was like, oh, you have a team in Chicago.
Yeah.
I would like when I was growing up, like I was like I got into the AHL because of EA Sports. Like that's how I really got embraced into the AHL, because I obviously knew about it and whatnot, but like I didn't really know about it, and like I didn't really care about it until I started playing Chell and it was in Chell consistently.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, a team in Chicago, that must be, the Wolves must be the Blackhawks affiliate because they're in the same city. And it's like, nope. They're everyone else's affiliate but Chicago's. Chicago's is Rockford.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know that you guys have been like for a very long time, but it was always a head scratcher.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The Hawks actually purchased the Ice Hogs this year, so they're going to be their affiliate for here on out. But the Wolves, aside from having one of the best jerseys and logos in the game, severely underrated in my opinion, that maroon jersey. For the longest time, they were an independent team, so they weren't affiliated with anybody. So the Hawks, if they had a guy that was going to be on a short-term rehab assignment, they would send him to the Wolves because they were right there. But that was back when their affiliate was Norfolk, the Admirals. So it was like, okay, we can send them to the Wolves. They're close enough. We can check on them. Our doctors can still work with them. It all worked out. And then the Wolves decided to start becoming an affiliate with different teams. The worst is when they were affiliated with the Blues. And a lot of Hawks fans are like, we like that we have a team in town, but we can't go cheer for Blues prospects. Like, come on now. Wolves loyalists, they stuck with them. And then I think they were a Vancouver affiliate for a while. And again, Hawks fans are like, hello, that doesn't work well for us. Then they were the Vegas affiliate. Now I think they're with
Carolina.
Yeah, Carolina. So now
Charlotte's with Florida.
Yeah. Hawks fans are like, okay, we'll go back to Wolves games because they're nice and close and cheap. And it's a fun time. I've gone to quite a few Wolves games. In fact, when they beat the Bridgeport Sound Tigers for the Calder Cup, me and my dad were at the game. I was interning at ABC News in Chicago that summer. And we're out on assignment, not far from our house. And my dad calls me and I pick up and he's like, hey, it's game 7 tonight. Do you want to go? I was like, oh, did you get tickets? He goes, nah, but I'm thinking maybe we'll be able to drive up there and go to the box office and see if they have anything. And he goes, and if they don't, we'll go to one of the bars right there and watch the game. I was like, all right, sounds fun to me. So we go up there and got 2 standing room only tickets all the way at the top of the Allstate Arena. And we get there. The lights are already down dark for their little laser show and everything beforehand. So my dad, being my dad, he's like, I got to hit the can before we go in. It's like, all right, fine. And then we grab our beers and we're just standing along the back and the woman comes up to us. Can't hear it because it's so loud. And finally I hear, do you want better seats? And I go, yeah. So I grab my dad. He's like, what? He's like, follow me. So we wound up being the fans of the game. We're sitting in recliners, like just above kind of the main section. Great views, and it was in the end that if it was just a regulation game, the Wolves would have shot on twice. But because it was like a triple overtime game, it was even more. And I just remember we had these two old nuns sitting to the left of us, and they were the loudest, most obnoxious fans I've ever sat next to, which was great. And thunder sticks were still the big thing. So the whole game, they're pounding those things together. I had a headache for like 3 days afterwards because of it. But, so we get to sit in these recliners for a 3 overtime game 7 game. And it was like, this was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a couple of Belleville games since they've come back, or since Binghamton has moved to Belleville, and it's a great atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, the beauty of living in Ottawa is that you're not very far from any hockey. We have the 67s, we have the Senators. There's a 2.5 hour drive to Belleville. It's a 2.5 hour drive to Montreal if you want to catch a Canadiens game. You can go to Laval and catch a Laval Rockets game.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of hockey all around us. So I've gone to a couple of Belleville games and Belleville was huge hockey. They had the Bulls for the longest time.
Yeah.
They supported that team like crazy. But I think what's crazy with the AHL, and I mean, this is like for a goalie standpoint, we have Philip Gustafson who came over from Pittsburgh in the Broussard trade, and his AHL numbers hot garbage. They were horrible. People were calling him a bust. He wasn't going to amount to anything. And then he comes up to the NHL and lights out. Fantastic numbers. He was looking great. He was composed. He was confident. And people were like, oh, we didn't see this coming. And I'm like, yeah, because you guys don't know how AHL hockey works. 9 times out of 10, how a goaltender plays in the AHL will never actually translate to how he plays in the NHL. No matter if it's good or bad, it's a gong show down there. And people are starting to realize that if you're a goaltender and you're going down to the AHL, especially a European, it's going to be a gong show.
Yep. Well, it's just like playing beer league hockey, where it's like, if I play down a level, it's so hard because the game's not moving the way it should. But when you play up, to me, it's easier.
Yeah.
I almost play better when I play up. And I think that's the role or the situation some of these AHL goalies fall into. They're like, this should be happening, but I mean, what we would consider a broken play compared to what they consider a broken play are two, night and day. They're on different planets, but certain things are happening there that to them shouldn't happen, and it's catching them out of position.
Yeah, it's how, like, goaltenders, I feel they get a lot of hate by players by people who never actually played the position.
Yeah. Well, they all think we do no skating.
Yeah, and that's not true. Sometimes your best goaltender, like your best skater, is the goaltender. 9 times out of 10, I feel like if you were to, in a pure skating competition, not speed, not power or anything, just overall skating, the goaltenders are usually the best ones on their feet.
Absolutely.
But overall, I feel like a lot of people don't understand that, like, you have to react to plays. You have to be proactive. You have to kind of read what's going on to you. And in the AHL, there's so much roster turnover game to game, let alone, week to week. You have to expect certain players to be in certain positions, and you never really gain that kind of chemistry with your teammates the way you would in the NHL. And you don't really know where they're going to be at a certain time in a certain spot. So if you're like, okay, that person should be here accounting for this player, I have the shot, and that person is not accounting for that player, well, that literally leaves a wide open cross crease one-timer.
Yeah.
If you still have to play the shot, you're kind of left in no man's land. So it's like, it's things like that I don't think people really take into account when evaluating goaltenders.
No, and luckily, I think NHL teams are starting to take that into account. I mean, you hear it all the time on the In Goal podcast when they talk to some of these goalies, and they're like, yeah, not that long ago, the AHL didn't even have full-time goalie coaches. Now, pretty much every team has a full-time goalie coach. In the NHL clubs, they have like goalie departments where, you know, the team has their own goalie coach. They have another one down in the AHL, but then they almost have this overseer of goalies, you know, at the top of all of it. And of course, they're all of them are goalies, they're investing a lot more in the position now, in the understanding of the position, you know, because for a long time, goalie got sent to the AHL. There was no coaching. They were just kind of figure it out on your own kind of deal. Now there's these development coaches that work with them, and it's the right move.
Yeah, and then you're also seeing development coaches expand. Like usually, if you brought in a development coach that was a former player, like a former forward, he would just strictly, if he was a defenseman, he would strictly work with the defenseman. Now you're seeing more. You know, players are very smart. They don't just work with their position. Like, and I think this is a page out of football. You know, you have a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of former quarterbacks working with receivers, DBs working with receivers, former receivers working with DBs, because they want to teach them how to get inside of their opponent. And I think what you're seeing now is the, you know, forwards and defense working with goaltenders to try and get inside, get the goalie to think like where the player is, and vice versa, which I think has a lot of benefit to players in the long run when they're mixing with each other, because you guys can start learning about each other and, you know, where to expect and where to be, versus just figure it out on your own, guys.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to be mindful of time, because we've been talking a while, and I love it. And this is what I love about the podcast, because I can just talk hockey to people. But you have your own podcast. You know, what's the name of it, and where can people find it, first of all?
Yeah. So I got two. I have the 13th Man Sports Podcast, where we kind of just talk sports in general, CFL, NFL, NHL, OHL, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then I have the Sens Hour Podcast, which is just strictly the Sens stuff. You can find the 13th Man Sports on Twitter. And then Sens_Hour on Twitter are the two podcasts where you can find me at. It's been kind of a rough one this year for the Sens, just because of time and whatnot. So I'm hoping to get back into that this year as things kind of settle down with work and whatnot. But yeah, it's honestly, these podcasts, you can just forget about time and just kind of, next thing you know, you have a 2-hour episode.
You know, though, I love those episodes, because sometimes there's those episodes where you struggle to get to an hour, and it's like, oh, I uploaded it, and it's like, oh, I did reach an hour. And then there's the other ones where it's like 2 hours, and you're like, man, it felt like we were talking for 45 minutes.
Yeah. Like, you said you talked to Neil, him and I, like, when we get together, we can talk for hours.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those things where we talk for hours on end. And if there wasn't a time, like, oh, wait, we need to get off, the podcast, like, we could have a live show that would go on for like 5 hours and we wouldn't even notice. We wouldn't take a break, nothing like that. It would just kind of be continuous.
Yeah, Neil and I, we were talking and had good conversation going, and would have gone longer, but he had a live show that night. So that's the only thing that stopped us that night, is the fact that he had his own live show.
Yeah, I think he had the watch along, because he's been doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
Recently. And yeah, for people listening, we do watch live watch alongs where we watch our team's games together. Super fun. They're all on YouTube. It actually is a lot of fun. Haven't had a chance to do one yet. But going and watching it, like, it's just a great time.
Yeah, I haven't, like you, haven't had a chance to participate in one, but it seems like it's just, you know, you're watching a game with a couple buddies and hearing their commentation back and forth and whatever comes up.
Yeah, it's kind of great. You get to see your reaction live, and, you know, overall, it's just like, it's a fun time where it's like, oh, we get to react live. We get to interact with people, see how they're feeling about the game. It kind of makes it, because like you can interact with people during the game on Twitter, but there's something different about this that like hopefully I'll be able to do a game or two, but we'll see.
Yeah, it was funny because when the league was starting to look like we might be heading toward another shutdown, I had put the message on the Slack channel that I got a new GoPro for Christmas where I can now live stream my beer league games. I said, are we going to have to resort to some of the live streams of those? And Neil's like, we need to do it anyway. Just need to
that would be honestly get a GoPro and just upload the image of being in. It would be sick. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, because I do my beer league highlights, but I got a game this week, Sunday night, and I'm going to see how it works because I'm supposed to play, if we can find a few more players, in an outdoor tournament next weekend in St. Paul, and that would be a fun live stream, I think. And
100%.
Just having somebody like Neil chirp me the whole way. The only thing I got to try and figure out is how do I get a mic and an earpiece so that I can partake in it. that would be the
you get one of those you get mic'd up.
Yeah,
mic'd up.
I did some filming with Kane Van Gate this weekend while he was in town for the Winter Classic, and we mic'd things up, but the mic is the easy thing to figure out. It's getting the earpiece to hear what you guys are saying about me during the live stream. That's the difficult part.
Bluetooth headset connects you straight to the computer. You can connect to the live stream.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some homework and figure that one out. I think that would be fun. Probably only the 2 or 3 of us that are participating and putting it together would be the ones watching, but I think it'd be funny.
Hey, it'd make for great content. That's for sure.
Exactly. So, what got you into podcasting?
For me personally, I've always wanted it. Like I've always enjoyed the idea of talking about sports and being like doing this. It was just like I have ADHD. So I get hyper focused and like I get into things quickly and then I drop them quickly. So for me, it was always like, do I really want to do it? And if I do it, can I commit to it? Or is it not something I'm going to enjoy? This, that, and the other thing. And then it was probably October of 2019 where I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get into it. I'm going to do it. I started writing at that point, and it was just like Dylan found me on Twitter, and he's like, hey, we want you to join the network. And I'm like, cool. And that's just how I went into it. Like I wanted to go into radio broadcasting and whatnot. So it's just, this was my step into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. As I've mentioned before on the podcast, for me, I've been thinking about it, didn't really vocalize it much, but my family knew. And finally for Father's Day, they just bought me the microphone and a book on, how to start your own podcast. And I was like, do it. So in that fall, I launched the podcast, and here we are. I think this is going to be episode 64. 64 episodes later, some awesome guests that I've had on, and some awesome ones I've got lined up for the coming weeks. And it's like, as long as I can keep scheduling goalies and good guests, I'm going to keep it up.
Yeah. I mean, like it was going strong, and then, COVID happened and whatnot, which kind of derailed a lot of things. But honestly, I love doing it. It's just a matter of, consistency and, making sure that you have the time and whatnot. And I mean, guests are a huge thing. Getting as many guests as you can, I always feel like make it worth it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I didn't pigeonhole myself with only finding pro goalies. At the same time, my first job out of college was a journalist for a small weekly, local paper, but I was covering sports, and I learned, those pro athletes, they have good stories. They're fun to hear and listen to, but it's those no-name athletes that have almost better stories that you want to hear. You just don't know it. And so, some of the best episodes I've had have been with beer league goalies and high school goalies. It's like nobody would ever have a reason to listen to those people if it wasn't for the podcast. So now they've had a chance to hear their story.
Yeah, I mean, it's always getting those kind of people, because like for me, like I like the 13th Man one that we started. It actually started off as like a player specific, like we wanted players to come on and kind of talk more about themselves and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, their upbringing, more than just the athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where things started. And then, you know, the other guy that I work with, he's in school for journalism, so we kind of expanded to writing and whatnot. And now we're entering in technically year 2 of this, and it's crazy how things can just kind of, you know, spiral down quickly.
Yeah, but in a good
way. And it's been great.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, you know, my family for New Year's, we put together our vision boards and we come up. And the last 2 years, my vision board has included things I want to do for the podcast, you know, in the coming year. And it's funny because as we were doing them this year, we were looking back at the old ones. And even my kids were like, did you do this and this and this for the podcast? I was like, yes, I did. So, you know, as I was putting this year's together, I was very intentional with what I wanted to do for the podcast. And one of my biggest things is consistency, because I think that's where a lot of podcasts lose listeners is inconsistency. There's been some great podcasts that I liked, but they might go 4, 5, 6 weeks without an episode. And it's like, then I forget about them.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. Like, what's kind of happened with me is that, like, you get busy with other things, and it's like,
yeah,
you kind of just forget that you have this other thing going on. And it's like, then, because like the 13th Man, when we were doing really well, we were posting episodes every week, and then we just got busy with everything, and then we kind of lost it. So 2022, like, we've gained a lot in terms of like media, like writing, but now we want to get the podcast going, the YouTube going,
Yep.
stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of posting consistently, and posting not just consistently, but like quality content too. You can post as much as you want. You know, you can post an episode a day, but if it's not quality episodes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think some listeners and content consumers realize what goes into producing all of that content. Because even writing a blog, there's a lot that goes into that. And then just the amount of time it takes to then promote it on social. And, you know, a simple podcast, even though I do very little editing, it still takes me a minimum of an hour to do, you know, the editing and post-production stuff before I can upload it. And, you know, when you work a full-time job and have kids and everything else, that gets tough. Luckily, my family is very supportive of it. So I'm also mindful and try and only schedule one interview a week. Sometimes there's 2 because I might be working with, you know, a pro goalie or something where I got to work around the schedule. But that I try and keep that to a minimum because that also prevents me from burning out.
Yeah, like I had, you know, this is my 3rd recording this week, but this is the most I've done in probably like 3 months.
Yeah.
Because I've been so focused with work and everything else, where I've just been like, I have no time for anything.
Yep.
You know, as much as I want to get into it, like I can't afford to put time into it. So like, this is my 3rd one so far, and I hope that it'll be, you know, 2 a week for the most part. But yeah, I think once it should be a lot of fun over the 2022. And I mean, obviously, if you ever want more guests, I'm obviously would love to come down.
Yep. So I'm going to say for the second time, being mindful of time. If you've listened to any of the episodes, you know I close out each one with a list of 10 rapid fire questions. I'll always call them rapid fire, but they're not. They take some time. And what I like about them, those are the same 10 questions I've asked every single guest. All 63, regardless of skill level. And I'm kind of kicking myself because I didn't start this at the beginning, but I've been going back and re-listening to the rapid fires of all 63 episodes. So it's going to take me a while, but I'm putting together a spreadsheet to track the answers to see how they match up and see what the most popular responses are to them. And the first one is, what is the craziest coaching moment from your playing days?
Ooh. If it's going to be hockey, it's probably, I was 14. It was summer ball hockey. It wasn't even ice hockey. I was playing it with a couple of friends. They needed a goalie, so I'm like, sure, I'll play this. I wasn't even part of the team. Like I wasn't like I was playing football, but it was one of my like non-practice days. So I was like, sure, I'll play this game. I'll hop in net for you guys. The opposing team's coach broke his clipboard over his knee and then stormed off. Like it looked like one of those like classic NHL moments. Because one of his players accidentally scored on his own net. And it wasn't like, again, I'm on the other side, so I can't actually see what's going on. But all I see, one of my friends at the time was actually in the offensive zone when it happened. The guy passed it to his teammate while his teammate was like, they were looking at each other. He passed it to him. And as he's passing it, the guy looks away and it bounces off the guy's foot and into the net. And I'm like, what? Because I guess their goaltender wasn't paying attention either.
Oh boy!
And it's vivid because it was like my first what the actual hell just happened moment.
So I like that one because I was a freshman in high school when we were in the state playoffs, and our coach got thrown out of the game for simply questioning a ref's call, and it's not like he used colorful language or anything, and he throws his clipboard and it breaks on my teammate's helmet, and then he has to storm off, but the rink we were playing at had these stairs up to like a storage room that the door is locked, and they're metal stairs at that, so he just like stomps up the stairs and sits at the top of them like pouting. So I can only imagine what the kids on the other bench were thinking. And to bring that story full circle is that coach was going to school to be a psychiatrist, and he invited me and the kid who he broke the clipboard over his head. He invited us to his wedding. So we got him a clipboard as a wedding gift. And
amazing.
Yeah. And like his wife, they were dating at this time. So she knew the story going in. In fact, I think she was there, but they were allowing people to get up and talk during the reception rather than tapping the glasses, and he'd have to get up and tell a story of, some of your fondest memories of the two. So me and TJ, we get up and you see the look on Paul's face. He's like, no, you two go sit. Like he even told us, you two go sit down. And Wendy's going, no, I want to hear what these fellas have to say. So then fast forward a couple more years, and Paul and his family are in Minnesota now, going to the Mall of America. So I meet up with him for dinner, and he's got 3 young boys, and they're telling stories, and Paul's telling some ones of me, that don't make me look too good. And I go, has your dad ever told you the time that he got thrown out of a hockey game? And they're like, no, tell us this one. And he's like, don't. And his wife's just sitting there like, you did it. And so I tell him the story, he breaks the clipboard, and they're all like, Dad. And then they go full on like parent mode. They're like, how did that make you feel? Because he's a psychiatrist. They're like, how did that make you feel, Dad? Did you try these techniques to calm down, Dad? And it was just like perfect to bring it back to his own kids.
Amazing. That's honestly great.
Yeah. So the next question, what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
Ooh, this is difficult. Anything with Ed Belfour is top 5 easily. Like his,
yep.
I think the Eagle, always amazing. Patrick Gouline's Martian.
Yeah,
having Marvin the Martian on his helmet, iconic. Theodore's helmet was like one of Montreal. Like when he was in Montreal, his helmet was iconic. Oleg Kolzig. I don't know how he wasn't brought up in this episode, but like there are so many iconic ones I can't pick. Like this is a hard question for me. If I had the one that actually like stands out, I think early like 2000s, like when Luongo was first in Florida, his first stint, his mask actually had like the Panther's mouth
Pink Panther
open on it, and it looked like he was like the teeth were at the top and the bottom. I think it was Luongo.
I thought that was Fitzpatrick that had that one. Well,
I feel like a lot of goalies have had
Van Beesbroek had that iconic one with the armadillo mask. And then I know Fitzpatrick had one like that. I didn't think Luongo had one. I'm going to have to look that one up. I remember he had the Pink Panther mask where he was wearing like a Ken Dryden type mask. He had some good ones in Florida. There's another goalie. I didn't like him at the time. But when you go back and look at his body of work, he was just so good. Maybe
it was a Roberto Luongo. I mean, he was I was young when he was there, so.
Yeah. You talk about crazy coaching moments in Luongo. I was at a Hawks game sitting 8 rows behind Luongo, and Mike Keenan was coaching the Panthers. And he had one of his epic tirades where he's throwing sticks on the ice at the referees while plays going on and everything else. And it's like, yep, classic Mike Keenan.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
So I've played out at Canadian Tire Center. At the time, it was still the Corral Center. That was one of my favorites because, I mean, playing at an NHL rink is always going to be my favorite. I think by the end, there's a rink in Ottawa. It's the Barbara Ann Scott Arena. It's one of our teams played, the Ottawa West and Golden Knights. Something about that arena, like, it's small, but it's good. Like, it's just you hear of these arenas that are like that old, like, cozy feeling.
Yeah,
that's what it kind of provides. Like, it's just like you play in it and you're like, wow, like, it's so inviting. It's so nice. It's the stands are nice. The lighting, everything about it is nice. The change rooms, when I played, they were good. Like, they didn't feel like they were crummy, weird, creepy. Like, it was just a nice, cozy arena to play at. And, like, I go back to it and I'm like, damn. Like, even as a spectator watching these games, it's comfortable. Like, I like being here.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned there's the rinks where everything's nice, and then you get into the locker room and you're like, oh, was it an afterthought when they were designing this place, like, or what? Was this on purpose to make us feel uncomfortable?
I mean, I also played out at what it used to be the Civic Center. I played a game there. Like, there was also, I played out in a tournament in Brockville, and their arena was, and even Pembroke with the Lumber Kings play. I didn't play an official game. It was a pickup game, but still a very good arena.
Yep. So what is your favorite stick that you've used?
Ooh, this is a difficult one. Oh man, I don't even
That's
remember.
why I ask it.
See, I grew up as a CCM kid.
Yep.
Like, all my stuff used to be CCM for the most part. But I never really cared about the name of the sticks. So I cannot answer that because I do not remember, because I don't have it anymore.
Yeah, see, I don't always remember what pattern the sticks were, but the make I could usually remember of the sticks I've used. But yeah, CCMs, I had the it was the Healy 10 back when CCM had just taken over Heaton, and it was a CCM Kolzig, and I used that one for a long time. That was probably the best CCM stick I had.
My first stick, oh man, I can't even remember the name. Because again, I don't like. Yeah. I'm horrible for names to begin with. Asking me to try to remember a hockey stick name, I could not tell you. Because I never really cared about the look or I didn't care about the look. I always cared about the feel. So
right.
I never really gravitated to a specific stick model. I would just go and try out a couple of different sticks and kind of whatever felt right in my hand.
Yeah.
Well, that was the one that I went with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel the same way. In fact, I just got a Vaughn stick for the first time, and I love the feel. I was like, why didn't I use one of these sooner? That to me, that's what's most important, not the name on it. So what is your favorite youth hockey memory?
So I don't know if you heard about it, but one of them, and I mean, this one was kind of my, I can actually be, if I took goalie, being, playing hockey seriously, like I did with football, I probably could have, been a pretty good goaltender. I'm not, not to toot my own horn, but, it was kind of that moment where I'm like, wow, like if I actually put my mind to this, I could, possibly do something with it. Bell Capital Cup, it was my first like shutout. And as a kid, that's huge because you're generally, you're playing on bad teams and whatnot. One player of the game, and it was just one of those like confidence boosts where you're like, I can like, yeah, I'm not playing at the highest level, obviously, but like as a 10-year-old, you're not thinking that. You're like, wow, I just won player of the game at a big tournament. I got a shutout at a big tournament against a team that I don't normally play against. It was just a confidence boost as a 10-year-old, being like, hey, maybe I can do this when I'm older, kind of thing.
Yep. No, that's a good one. I like it. So what's the best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, in the locker room, directed at you, not directed at you? Maybe you've chirped at somebody else.
So this is actually probably recently. So a couple of years ago, probably like 2019, it was, again, ball hockey because it's just easier to play during the summer than trying to rent like actual place in Canada because it's ridiculously expensive during the summer. Basically, you remember when Marchand licked the Tampa player, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah. So we were playing a game, and all I hear was, I'm going to pull a Marchand on you and lick you. And it's not much, but just to hear someone say that to somebody else, you're just like, you had to take a step back and be like, what just happened?
Yep. Yeah, I like it. So what's the worst post-game beer you've had?
Budweiser. Like, okay, I don't drink much. Like, I'm not much of a drinker, and I'm not huge into beer. But no matter, like, every time I have a Budweiser, I hate it.
Yeah,
it's gross. Like, I can't do it. I feel like it doesn't sit well with my stomach. Like, the aftertaste is bad. It's not my go-to. Like, I'll drink it if I have to. Like, if it's there and I'm like, I kind of want to drink, I'll force myself into it. But it's definitely not my first choice.
Yep, my grandfather referred to Budweiser as cat pee. And that said something because he really liked beer, and it really didn't matter what beer it was as long as it was beer, and he wouldn't touch Budweiser.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Yep. So when you tape your stick, do you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
Ooh. So player stick, I go toe to heel. Goalie stick, I go heel to toe.
Okay. Yeah. Most goalies I've talked to go heel to toe. And this is the question that prompted me to go back and start listening to everything so I could get the exact breakdown of what the percentages is. So I'm hoping to get that done sooner or later. And I can just start keeping that up on my blog so people can see where it's sitting. So what's your favorite number to wear and why?
30, and because of Birder.
That's a good reason.
Like, you, again, favorite player growing up, like, overall, it was Birder and then Heatley were my two favorites. So goalie will always be 30. I will never want anything but 30. I mean, maybe I'll wear a 1 because I have worn that in the past, and, like, I am a Luongo fan, so but it's my 4 numbers really are 30 and 1 and then 15 and 9.
Okay. I like it. So last question, what advice do you have for young goaltenders?
Take the summer off. I've had the pleasure of talking to a lot of young goaltenders and being able to go to some of the camps, and it's like, and even in football, it's like a lot of people start specializing in a sport at a young age.
Yep.
You're 10 years old. You don't need to start specializing in hockey at 10 years old. Go play another sport. Maybe do a camp or 2 during the summer. That's fine, but go play another sport. Go play golf. Go play basketball or soccer or baseball. You'll be better for it in the long run. You're 10 years old. You do not need to spend every waking minute focusing on this one sport in this one position 24/7. Go out, have some fun, and also understand that you're going to have ups and downs, and that's okay. You're not going to be perfect every day. No one is, and it's just understanding that, like, when you hit that wall, sometimes it's okay to pull back.
Yep.
Instead of fighting it, because at the end of the day, that wall is not going to go anywhere the more you push at it. Sometimes you really need to take that back and attack it from a different angle.
Yeah, and that's great advice to take the off season off, and I hope that if COVID gave us anything, is it gave some of those young athletes and their parents that realization that, yeah, you can take time off from the sport and it be good for you. Almost better for you than if you played year round. Now, I was the kid that I chose to play hockey year round, but it was my choice. In fact, mom and dad were trying to get me to play other sports. It's like, no, I love the game of hockey so much. And, you know, they could see it and they understand it. So I'm not saying every kid has to play different sports all the time, because there are kids that were like me where it's like they just live, eat, breathe the game, and that's all they want to do. Great. Let them do it, but let them do it on their own terms.
Yeah, because I mean, if a kid wants to do it, it will never be tiring. The minute you start forcing them to do it, they'll stop enjoying it. And I think I've seen a lot of kids who think that, oh, I need to practice every day. I need to be on the ice every day. And a lot of parents start think the same thing, and they get burned out. They stop enjoying it. They're tired. They don't have a social life. You know, all they know is, you know, wake up, eat, practice, repeat. Like that's kind of their routine. And it's like, you know, I work at a hockey focused store. I have relative, like, you know, on my significant other side, she has, you know, family who's in hockey, who go to school and specialize in hockey, but they also do other things outside of it. And it's like, I've seen a lot of parents be like, I need this, this, and this for my kid. And I'm like, that's fine. You can spend your money on it. But is this what your kid's asking for? Or is this what you're wanting him to do? Yeah. And I think a lot of parents have the right intentions. They think they honestly believe what they're doing is what's best for their child. And you know what? That's great. But sit down and talk to them. See if that's actually what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones using it. You're the ones wasting your money on it if they're not going to use it.
Yep. Exactly. I think that's a great note to end on, but more importantly, where can people find you on social media if they want to follow you first?
Yeah, so you can follow my personal at Shane_RY13. Like mentioned earlier, you have the 13th Man Sports podcast. You can follow, or 13th Man Sports. You can follow us at 13th Man Sports on Twitter, Facebook. We have our website, everything posted there. And then as well as the Sens Hour at Sens_Hour on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. And I'll put those in the show notes as well for those goalies like myself who have probably already forgotten what those were. That way they can just click on them and get there. So thank you for your time. Like you mentioned when we started, you know, we were trying to get this done and, you know, life gets in the way. So I'm glad we were able to get it done and connect.
Yeah, and hopefully I can come back on sometime later this year and continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you.
Shane was a fun guy to talk to. As I mentioned, we had to adjust our schedules after originally planning to talk before the new year. Be sure to follow Shane on Twitter at Shane_RY13 and the Sens Hour Podcast on social media at Sens_Hour, and of course the 13th Man Sports Podcast on social media at 13th Man Sports, no spaces. You can always find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube simply by searching for Wash Up Goalie and I'll pop up. Visit washupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey videos, and, of course, all podcast episodes. If you want some Wash Up Goalie or Tendy Talk apparel, be sure to visit my Threadless shop by clicking the merchandise link on my website. If you like this podcast, go listen to the BLPA Big Show. It's the OG BLPA Podcast Network show where a couple of beer league players talk beer league hockey, draft experience shenanigans, and exploits from around the game. Be sure to check out the full lineup of hockey-related podcasts on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. There are too many to list here, but shows like the Leaf Sky Podcast, The San Jose Hockey Now podcast and the Bob Matthews podcast can all be found. And if you're visiting DraftKings, be sure to use THPN as your promo code. I need to thank the band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music on my podcast. You can download their music on iTunes or listen wherever you stream music from. I'm always working on lining up other goalies to talk to. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washedupgoalie39@gmail.com or send me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you're a brand who wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the podcast platform you're listening on. It's a quick action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. Until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck. Hey!
Checked out Ketchell's pond. He calls up Tommy Taylor. Tom said the pond, it froze right over. So get the nets and lace your skates and get the hot chocolate for your mom today. When you get home.
Yeah, dude.
Hey, have you checked out the pond today?
It's funny you ask. I was just down there this morning.
Yeah, any good news?